Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have the lovely, this, you're just like making my heart warm up right now. I don't need like that. This is just I feel like a different kind of energy to the start of today. I don't know. I
Mm.
just do, but you're just incredible. I have the lovely Tammy Harris on the podcast, friends that are listening. Tammy, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Caleb. I will not ever forget the first time I met you. Feelings were mutual. It was just like that instant, when you know your people, you're my people.
You're my
Mhm.
people. You're my people. You're this, you know what? That's a strange thing you're saying there. You're the second person this week who says, I will never forget the first time I met you. Now, mind you, this is a client. She just came back. We met 6 years ago. She's like, just, I don't remember meeting a lot of other people, but I remember you. And she detailed this whole thing. Like we were sitting at some networking meeting. I sit in, she's like, you're sitting there like kind of crossed like this, arms like this, and you're like, he's kind of like, she's like, who's this, fitness ass, whatever, in her mind,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's
There's
a guy with his arms crossed. That would have been me analyzing you. Like, what's going on with him?
not like reserved. And then she's like, you spoke up, and then you're like, you were like warm and bubbly. I was like, well, that's really the presentation. Like, I walk into a room. I'm actually far more introverted than a lot of people think. I'm usually taking it in and be like, well, where do I start this? Like, who are the people that are really going to be cool in this space? So anyway, thank you for
Interesting.
saying that. That I feel like I'm part of your crowd, your crew now. I feel
You
that
are.
transitioning into, well, if you have listened to any of the episodes, you know that I like to tell my guests why I love them
Yes.
when we start.
Yes.
And the fact that you also say, I'm living the dream when people ask you how you're doing today, if that's not an indication more than anything right there, because that's how I like to start. But especially since you've shared a little bit of yourself in our previous conversation, your resilience and not only just in the face, like your resilience in the face of very challenging things, but more, I have a great admiration for anybody who still like keeps a smile on their face and keeps hope and keeps optimism. I was doing a little bit of reflection around transformational leadership earlier today because I was doing some other stuff, just poking around on internet things. And like one of the key things within all of that is this hope, this optimism, and this like deeper belief in the dark times.
Mhm.
And that's something I deeply appreciate about your story and yourself, just as a person. And plus, you make me feel like I've known you forever. And I think that's always a key indicator of like, okay, we're gonna be cool. We're gonna be friends from
Yeah.
the get-go. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You should know that you're loved. We need to start telling each other why we love each other more.
Oh,
What the hell's wrong with us with not doing that?
seriously, it's such a simple gift that is this free gift that we can give at any moment. And I really pray that your listeners take advantage of that today. Look for those opportunities, right? You're in line for your coffee or the person serving your coffee. Just make their day.
It's a simple thing we can do.
Mhm.
We can. Let's do this. You know yourself better than I. Tam, share with the world. Who are you?
Oh, well, I know. We when we chatted the first time, I always struggle a little bit because there's so many pieces to my story, but so I am going to be 55 years old. um, 55 spins around this earth next month. And reflecting on my story in my life, it started really young. I have faced adversity pretty much my whole life. I think I'd shared a little bit about that. Actually moved out of my parents' house. They lived in the country on into another house when I was 11. So it started very young. Was super self-driven, have no idea. Nobody in my family had ever even gone to college. But I was straight A student. I did not miss one day of high school, which I know I'm a weirdo, such a weirdo, right?
I'm laughing because I didn't miss a single day of high school.
No
I
way.
got
I
an
knew
award for the
it.
damn thing. Yeah. I'm like,
Okay.
we're way too similar. Way too similar.
Way too similar. That's a little scary. Yep, that's a little scary. with all of that said, went through a lot of, there were times of trauma and all types of different things, but it led me into, was very successful. Very young. I worked in the fitness industry, another like-minded thing. Came right out of school, was recruited by a company called Apex Fitness and was a national rep for them. But unfortunately, I was always attracted to bad relationships. Didn't Although I was successful by the world's standards and everything appeared to be great, knowing what I know now at this age, I really just didn't have any self-worth. And I didn't believe that I deserved to be treated well. And I mean, it's kind of funny. I ended up, the person I married, and I was married for 24 years, was extremely narcissistic and abusive. I wouldn't have even really known to call it that. Didn't really even understand what coercive control was, but in every area that is possible, there was abuse, and it was spiritual abuse. We served in the church for over 20 years. There was financial abuse. There was unbelievable control. I had camera. I don't even know if I told you this last time. There were cameras inside my house. Yeah, crazy.
Oh,
But I guess the part of the story that I really want to share, because I think I shared with you, like, I don't know exactly what God wants to do with my story, except for I know that if there's one person that's listening that needs help and needs hope, um, I know that I lived in silence for a lot of years. And we kind of talked about the whole dogmatic Christian thing. And I still love God, and I'm not here to badmouth anything. In fact, I think most people just don't know. We're raised in a certain culture or church or whatever, and it just kind of perpetuates itself. So I don't have animosity about that, but I did live um, with abuse and silence. The few times I tried to talk about it to people, um, I was told to submit more. I was told to love my husband the way he needed to be loved. I was asked what I was doing wrong. And I wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. I was not perfect, but I was committed. I believed in the sanctity in marriage. I believed in never getting divorced. I believed in all those things. And I have 4 kids. So I homeschooled for 12 years. After leaving the fitness industry, we were chatting earlier about the first time I held my precious baby, my first baby girl, Natalie. I was like, yeah, I can't go back to traveling and leave her. And never, ever, I was literally the person that said I would never homeschool. I had plans. I was going to be in really good shape. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a baby and I have a nanny and I'm gonna get back. I'm going to the gym. That's where I was going, right? Yeah. So anyway, never, never will regret one day of homeschooling my kids. It was such a blessing to be so close to them and teach them, and had no idea they had dyslexia, and became a certified dyslexic tutor to help them with that. But so yeah, so 24 years into this marriage, my husband left me in August of 2020, but it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. And it's crazy to say that now because I was terrified. I probably even had a little bit of, I don't know if you've ever heard, have you ever heard of Stockholm syndrome?
yeah.
Mhm. I didn't think I could survive without him. I hadn't really worked. I did a little bit of work in direct sales outside the home with a company called Beauty Counter, but I really didn't think I could take care of myself or my kids. Really, it was more about my kids than me. Um, but it's crazy because here we are, 3.5 years later. I was in court 69 times through these court proceedings for divorce, for child support, which he hasn't paid in 3 years, all the things. And when he left, I had 46 cents. I started a company. I now am a full-time transformational business coach, which I absolutely love. But I have to say, like, I have never been better. I've never been stronger. And the greatest thing is, Caleb, I think for the first time in my life, I know my worth. And I had a mentor, her name was Betty, she's since passed, that when early on, she was the first person I called, and she said to me, you have to, there's 4 simple words that even when you don't believe it, you need to speak it and it will become truth. And it really was, I trust you, God. And it's the craziest thing because when you're in it, when you're in those challenges, whether it's divorce or it's the loss of a loved one or whatever it is, health challenges. I know a lot of people battling cancer, whatever you're battling with, um, we don't, it's a falsity that we have control. It's kind of crazy, right? We think we have all this control and we can do all the, and believe me, I'm the crunchy mama, organic food, working out, don't drink the water. I'm like the crazy mom. But what I know to be true, and part of my story that I shared with you before, and I'll try not to get emotional, is in this process, I have 4 children. My daughter, Natalie, who's now 24, but my son, Joshua, in 2022, who was 19, passed away. And that was, yeah, there is no greater loss than for a parent to lose a child. I'd had friends who'd lost children and I felt like I could empathize with them, but until it happened, I couldn't. And I have 2 other sons. I have my son Jonathan, who's 19 now, and my son Hezekiah, who's 17. But it's crazy because even in these challenges, I think that what I've learned is that every single day, that every moment counts. And when we started, when we were talking about that opportunity to give someone a compliment, I can't even tell you, Caleb, how many people don't even know that they changed my life, that they showed up in those, maybe I was having a horrible day, right? Like, because we all put on the face, and I had to keep going. I had to work. I was coaching other people. My son passed away, and 30 days later, I'm coaching people and motivating them and helping them with business. But it's interesting to think about along the way. And I'm just curious because I'm sure you've had people, I know you've had life happen, that those moments when those people probably don't even know the significance of, sometimes it's even just a smile. Um, so, I just encourage people, no matter where you're at or what you're going through, like trust. That for me was like, even in those moments, it felt like, I'm like, there's no way. I have no idea how I'm going to pay rent. I have no idea how I'm going to put food on the table for my kids. It was crazy. Like I could write an entire book on the miracles that that happened. And I just encourage your listeners, like, be the miracle. Be the miracle.
I think it's worth coming back to what you just said there. Something as small, seemingly small as a smile,
Mhm.
when somebody's in a real shit day,
Oh,
you have no idea. I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I'm not, my wife's talking about every night now how her anxiety, she's like, I don't know why I have all this crippling anxiety every single night. And I'm like, I know why, because you're about to be responsible for another life. And you're starting to see all the ways things could go wrong. That's the thing. That's what's happening. I can't imagine. I can't imagine when sometimes the greatest fear comes alive and you're like, shit,
mm-hmm.
how do I keep going? And I think what you're speaking to here is, especially something I've learned in the past few years, is like it's the small gestures. It's the you're not alone. It's the acknowledgement that you're not alone. Like I see you, and I might not have all the things in the world to give, but for this moment, I can give you the acknowledgement. I can give you the moment that like you you fucking matter more
Yeah.
than some passing thing. Like you're not just another body of flesh. You're something that you're a unique individual who's going through a human experience, and I can see you for that. It's not, it seems small and it is very simple, but it can, when somebody's on that last moment, they need that little bit of hope. That could be so profound, so profound.
Mhm.
And especially, I think, but why I think that element of your story is so powerful is, and I'm sure the more you've talked to people in this day and age with the pandemic and everything, and now everything's virtual, you start talking to people around the world, and I'm sure you've seen it, is people are profoundly lonely. I think they were lonely before,
Yes.
but they were distracted lonely. Now they're
Uh,
like, oh no, no, I'm lonely.
yeah. It's crazy how isolated people became. And I think that there's even this greater greater picture in this, that it's even more of a reason for people to be so intentional.
Mm. I think when people hear like what people are like, what does intentional mean?
Mm,
I think we can explore that. But I think in my opinion, when I hear this, especially as you talked about your relationship with God, I think maybe I've shared this with you, but I believe we're in a spiritual health crisis. People can use whatever word they want. They can use
mm,
God, universe,
yeah,
unified conscious, spirit, whatever you want to call it,
right.
self. There's
Mhm.
such a loneliness in the soul
Mm,
that we're so devoid of that. We've offloaded our
mhm,
well-being, our sense of connection to external stuff, the car, the house,
mhm,
likes on social media, whatever, all external validation. We're so collectively empty here. Where I think about this intentionality you're speaking to is more about bringing it back to, well, what is connection?
mm,
Not only just to like others, but like to yourself. What does it mean to connect with your daily life? What does it mean to feel purposeful?
mhm,
Um, let's explore that a bit. Like, what do you do for yourself? I mean, let's also do like through those times, what did
mm,
you do for yourself to stay? I know you talked about, you know,
mhm,
believe in trust in God, but like,
mhm.
was there rituals, practices, things that you did, routines you set up with people? Like, what was some of those things that helped shepherd you through that dark time?
Well, I think one of the most important decisions that I learned to make through that time was surrounding myself with the right people. So, and you may or may not relate to this, but I am notorious for my whole life. I want to save the world, and notorious for sacrificing every ounce of myself for everyone else to the point of detriment, right? So, but through this process, I couldn't. But then what I found was it became so significant for me to surround myself. And I don't know if I don't know if this is a bad thing to say, but I think because I've lived in a world of so much judgment, that I really needed to be surrounded by people that just loved me unconditionally. Not because of what I could give them, because I didn't have anything to give for a while. I was so broken. And so really surrounding myself with friends like that. I had my spiritual mentor. She passed away about 6 months into my divorce, but man, have that coach, have that mentor. This woman, man, she founded a ministry. It was called Good Samaritan Ministries. It's all over the world, but I met her in my 20s. Um, I've had quite a story. I
Tell.
had a roommate that her fiance committed suicide in front of me, and I was a mess, as you can imagine. So that's when I started seeing this woman, like early 20s when I was in college, and she stayed in touch with me my entire life. And she wasn't a woman of many words, but when she spoke, it was profound. And you know what she always did, Caleb? She never gave me the answers because the answers are within you. She gave me good questions. So, I I just really pray and hope that people have that person in their life, whether it is a coach, a mentor, a spiritual person, whatever, whoever that is, right? Um, the other piece of it, it's kind of crazy. I had a person in my life, and I was in ministry myself, and I've always been a praying person, but I actually had somebody who committed for 1 year who prayed with me every morning and every night, no matter what.
Hmm.
And I do believe it was a huge part of my healing process because I'm going to tell you what, like, and we don't have time to go into the whole story of all of the abuse, but one thing that was really important for me was forgiveness. And it changed my life. Twofold. It was the prayer part of it, but also someone committing in that way to do that with me. So that was another big part of it. And then I think you know this as well, like just it's mindfulness, right? Like you'll laugh. My doctor, about halfway in, I've had all kinds of weird health stuff that happened from it. The body keeps score. Um, but I remember her saying to me, like, you don't breathe. It's like, well, of course I'm breathing. But no, I was like shallow breathing. And I think about it, one of the things that I do with my clients when we first get, because it's busy day and they're business people and we're going to be talking about their business, but I always have them like start with breath, like take 3 deep breaths and then tell me where they're at. Are you feeling anxious? Are you sad? Are you stressed? Are you in a good place? And it's so funny because I know that I spent most of my life, I'm a lot older than you, um, unconsciously creating my outcome.
Hmm.
So becoming a conscious creator is such a powerful piece of that. And I think it's a combination of all those things I just mentioned. It's surrounding yourself with people with the right energy, the right positivity, the like-mindedness, um, is so important, but also just practicing just those little techniques. I'm like, I know it sounds funny, but that was a big deal for me. Breath. I'm like, huh, wow, that's amazing. And then even I think a lot of my life, I wasn't allowed to feel, or my feelings weren't validated. I don't know if any of your listeners can relate to that, but that is a really, you start to question yourself. And so that's been a big part of this journey as well. Like not just allowing myself to feel them, but validating that that's how I was created, that that's normal, it's natural, it's good. We were created to feel. It doesn't mean it's always right thinking, because I've had to learn a lot about that too, because my false thoughts can make me feel not good. And I've really learned to manage my mind. But yeah, so those are some of my tools in the toolbox.
Well, the prayer and the forgiveness sound, especially the forgiveness. We might have to zoom back into
Mm.
that. I think so many people don't want to step into forgiveness or go down that path because a lot of
Mhm.
it's like, I'm letting this person off the hook or whatever. That's not really that's not what it's about. It's about also letting yourself move forward.
Oh,
Otherwise, you're
yeah.
always tethered.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember my mentor Betty saying to, because that was part of that process with her as well. She was like, it's it's not for you. It's not for him. And I was like, I don't know that I can do it. And she's like, you don't have to do it on your own. It doesn't make what happened okay, right? It wasn't okay. It was abuse. But the freedom that I experienced because you know, any type of negativity that we're bringing with us, even if it's towards another person, does not serve you well. In fact, it works in the opposite. It eats away. And so to have that freedom was, yeah, it's priceless.
Mm. I think also so the prayer and the forgiveness, but then you're talking about the breath. I really love what you were saying there about that. I think that leads to that intentionality you're bringing up. How most people are going through this unconscious existence, and the classic "I'm busy." That's keyword number one in my world. Like, I'm busy. I'm just so busy. Like, okay, are you?
Yeah.
But that's their like, it's like you can always tell underneath that, like that's their surface level justification for, but I feel like I'm productive. I'm
Mhm.
convincing myself that this way of life is okay.
Yeah.
Though, if you really take a breath, which I think people are actually afraid to do, when you
Mhm.
take the breath and you slow down, you look at it objectively, because we're the ones that are looking at it like, are you sure this is what you really want?
Yeah.
It's usually pretty obvious. Hey, you should probably just take a beat. Maybe you're not doing this thing the way you really like. You're doing a lot of shoulding. I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, and I have to do this, and and here's the whole laundry list checklist. That if you really unpack it all, you're like, this is somebody else's way they told you you're supposed to live, whomever that is, and it's usually childhood, whatever, without
Mhm.
therapizing, because it's not my job today. But I really feel for people, but I love what you're talking about. And you're right, it does sound like you're just going to take a breath. Like,
Yeah.
but when you haven't taken a real breath in a while, it's a pretty damn big, same way if you haven't had somebody smile at you in a while, that's a pretty damn big deal. But to take that breath, what I was hearing there is that it's to come back to yourself and, as you said, consciousness, but to intentionally observe your life. And you can't actually change anything until you become aware. As they say, like, first step to solving your problems, admitting you got a problem. You have to
Yeah,
become aware of the
exactly.
problems and first admit that
Yeah.
you. So,
You know, it's crazy. And this just popped into my mind. I had somebody say this to me the other day, and I was like, I had to really contemplate it. She said, I read a quote that said, all of us die from the same thing. And I was like, what does that mean? She said, it's lack of oxygen, it's lack of breath in the end. No matter what led to that, right? I was like, wow, that's pretty profound.
it is the last thing we do.
Mhm.
It's the first thing we do. We take
Mhm.
a breath
Yep.
and then we take a breath out. That's the
Mhm.
last thing. Well,
Yeah.
I think so many people forget that. We had a clinic at our this is a lot in my second spot. And we did a couple breath seminars. But in fact, we went out to California and did a whole workshop. It was like a 3 day. You ever heard of rock tape? You ever see people with all the kinesio tape and like the rock tape?
Yeah.
We went out there and it was their version of Woodstock. They called it rock stock. It was great. It was it
That's
was
amazing.
we had a good time. Like most of our staff went out. The whole weekend was about breath. And you see these things, you're like, you start watching how people breathe, and you're like, as you just said, most people they're just not breathing at all. Like you can't breathe into your stomach. It's all like, well, of course, you sound and look like you're in a panic all the time. That's not a sustainable strategy. So I love like, how would you think breathing is going to go for your business?
Oh, I
A,
know. You're like,
a
it's,
lot.
yeah, it's a lot. It's important. Yeah. Yeah.
But I love.
Well, and I think too, for people who are struggling, or if you're in it, or, you know, what I think the other thing that I realized, because I had been so silent about it for so long. I guess I thought I had to appear a certain way and I was in ministry and you have to have it all together, right? But what was crazy is when I started to open up and be transparent, it was mind blowing how many people who were had gone through it, had known them for 20, 30 years, didn't know it, were in it, trying to get out of it, or in all different stages of it, of just know, like, you're not alone. It doesn't matter what you're going through. Like, my philosophy is this: everybody's got a story. Some of us are just better at hiding it than than others. Right? So some of us can put on the mask, right? But when we start to take those masks off and that we start to authentically connect with people, and often it's over problems, it's over things that we've been through, right? It gives us this ability to connect in a way. And really at the end of the day, and probably part of this journey for me and where I'm at is like, I've been through a lot, but what I know, I believe my calling is to help people. And because of everything that I've gone through, it helps me connect in a deeper way that I would not be capable of doing if I hadn't experienced many of the things that I've experienced. And so I think when you can use trials, you can use challenges instead of like, why me? I see a lot of that. I see a lot of victim and a lot of, I don't like that. um, but instead turning that around is like, it was for me to make me who I am today.
It's weird how it's almost the scars that become your resume of like,
I like
I
that.
hold space for all this shit, like person who needs my help. It's it's strange that we know that we need that. You know what made me think of? You ever watch? So there's Bruce Almighty and then Evan Almighty. I don't think Evan Almighty wasn't the greatest movie, but there's still this moment. You ever watch it?
I have not. I'll have put it on my list.
I'll bring this is the punchline that I care about in the movie. It still sticks with me. I think it was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, maybe longer. Anyway, there's this moment. So this is kind of like the recreation of Noah's Ark situation. And so his wife leaves. She's like, I'm taking the kids. This has gone too crazy. F it, I'm out. She stops, they leave, that she stops at some bar or whatever, and then Morgan Freeman, who's God, he plays God in the thing. He's the bartender, of course.
Oh, of course.
And then the video on on the TV is the news coverage of her husband dealing with things. She kind of looks at it, it's like, I wish I was strong enough to be able to do the right thing, to be able to support whatever, blah, blah, blah. And God, or Morgan Freeman's character in this situation, turns, he's like, if you wanted strength, do you think God would just give it to you? Or would it give you the opportunity
Mm,
to realize your strength? And that made me think a little bit about what you're talking about there. Like sometimes we have to realize how strong we were. We're going
oh
to
yeah.
go through these trials, these tribulations. We're going to go through this crucible to evolve, to truly sharpen our skills. That's classic, diamonds are made under pressure, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But in that, as I was finishing up that statement, it made me also think about your mentor and
Yeah.
my Apple emoji thumbs up. I can't get enough
I
of this thing. Like I don't know,
I wish I had them. I don't have them. I think I need to update.
got to update, and I don't know how it happens. Anybody who's watching or listening, I should
Yeah.
say, I had some thumbs up thing because I gave a thumbs up. It's a weird thing. Anyway, um, what I really value about what you were sharing about your mentor, what's her name? Remind
Betty. Her
Betty.
name was Betty. Betty Mitchell.
What I really appreciate in leadership in general is when you ask a question instead of giving an answer. Because, for one, it takes a lot of confidence to ask a question instead of giving an answer. I think
Mhm.
people think it's the other way around, but it is not.
Mm-mm.
Ultimately, to say the words, I don't know, or even to say, by asking a question, it's like, and in a way that you were describing before, she's inevitably saying, you know, and you don't need me. There's a lot of like so much humility and inner confidence that's where it has to derive from. Here's another thumbs up. That one deserved another thumbs up.
That one did.
That one
Like,
really
that,
deserved
that was
it. That
good.
one really deserved it. So I appreciated that. And one of the reasons I'm bringing that out of late, my buddy Ian and we've been talking a lot about this, but specifically in one of the ways, and what I've also enjoyed through the podcast of late, I've done it a few times, but I feel like one of the responsibilities here is to help people with their BS detector, to look for the signs and the symptoms of a bullshit, basically, of control. Um, I grew up in a cult, and part of my gift, my crucible path, whatever, is that I can walk into any organization, I can talk to somebody for 4 seconds and be like, I know what the deal is around here. Is this
Yeah.
a control-based type of thing, or is this an empowering type of thing? And I think about it in an organization, let's call it a company. A well-run company, in my opinion, is a client-centric company,
Mm.
which means it's more about empowering the client. They get to guide the experience, and everybody feels free. Then go figure, people gravitate towards it.
Mm.
In a church, if it's about like, this is the way and this is my way, and this is, if you're not, fuck you, you're out. That's You talked a little bit about some of the spiritual abuse or financial abuse or that type of control energy. I'm bringing it out because I think so many people, if they just could identify
Mm.
what it is to walk into a cult-like scenario, and that can go on any scale. It could be a one-to-one relationship, or it could be a group relationship.
Mhm.
That's why I thought there was so much value in what your mentor, who could have probably taken pretty severe advantage of you in that very, very, very vulnerable state you were in in that point in your life, chose to ask questions and to help shepherd you through that time, not control you and
Yeah.
force you through that time.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a time to say, like, let's go, like,
Hmm.
hey, kid's gonna, burn their
Yeah.
hand on the stove, grab their hand, don't put your hand on the fucking stove. That different.
And yeah. Yeah.
But in general, especially these kind of longer term things, especially, I think what also maybe also brought a lot of power to that story around Betty is like she passed, but here you are capable of paying forward her lessons. I think that speaks to understanding one's purpose, and that it's not about you. It truly is about allowing others to gain and profit and ultimately pay it forward.
Mhm.
I've ranted for a few minutes, but
No.
some really beautiful things I heard in that. I wanted to make sure I just brought that out a little bit because it was, touched my heart.
It's crazy. Um, when in the last she had cancer and she knew she was dying, and towards it we were talking quite a bit, and then I hadn't heard from her for a couple weeks, and I actually was worried that maybe she had passed. I was like, do I reach out to her family? And I remember I had a horrible day at court. I don't even remember how I got home. I was like crying so hard. I was so frustrated. And my phone rang, and it was her. And it was the last conversation that we had. And I think we both knew that it would be. But in her last breaths, and literally she passed away the next day, she still was encouraging me and loving me. And her life, it was, I went to her, she lived in Oregon, flew to her services, and in Betty fashion, she had made a video that was played at her services. And in her video, she was still teaching us.
I'm crying a little bit
I
over
know,
here.
I know.
Shit.
It was like, yeah, but that is the kind of life and the kind of legacy that I think we should all strive for.
The person I just had on the podcast, or for when this airs, the last week one, we talked a lot about one of her things she talked about because her husband passed, and she was talking about it was his birthday into heaven, and kind of where I'm hearing, and especially with Betty, it's like there's certain people you know when they've truly lived in alignment.
Mm, yes.
I feel like those who truly live in alignment don't necessarily like, I think there's an appreciation of the physical death.
Oh,
But there's
mm,
not like a not a fear maybe in the traditional sense. There's like I've been facing it for a while and I've really thought about my I've been intentionally living for
mm,
this day.
mhm,
I appreciate this moment is coming and I don't know when is coming. So you start to cultivate a lifestyle that
mm,
allows you to impact and to well to be yourself in all ways. So what
mhm.
you're saying, like, of course she was teaching us on a video at her, like it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
about
mean,
her thing.
there was nobody there surprised because I mean there was thousands of people from all over the world. She had an impact all over the world, and but nobody was surprised because that was we called her Mama Betty. Mama Betty was teaching us, and so I think that's so significant. But and on the other piece of giving hope, because I know sometimes when I share my story, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you've been through so much and all these different things," but where I feel so unbelievably blessed is in part of this process of becoming who I'm called to be and everything else is that it also has opened up a space in my life that I'm now in the most beautiful, unbelievable relationship that I didn't even know was possible. I wasn't even sure that I could love again. And, for multiple of reasons of, believing that my marriage would last forever and that I would never be, even consider marrying someone else or just trust or all the different things. But that is how faithful I feel like God has been in my life that now I have this incredible man in my life who I'm like, I don't even, how can this be true? And we've been together. Yeah. I'm like, in the beginning, believe me, I was super skeptical. I'm like, I don't know. This seems too good to be true. But year and a half later, I'm like, wow, it's just, yeah, I feel like when you come to that place of understanding and understand your worth, and like you said, that word alignment is when you open yourself up to be able to find that or have that in your life as well.
I really appreciate what you just shared there because I think that the relationships, I truly believe the relationships that arrive in your life are not there by an accident. I believe they're attracted there by a magnetic energy that is merely showing you a reflection of internally what you believe you're worth.
Mm, I love that.
With that, like you're sharing, like you realized at a moment, like, oh, looking back, I didn't have any. I didn't, my sense of self-worth was not there. I guess what's I'm curious about, because I assure you, many people who do listen to this have a similar path, and
Yeah.
it takes one to know one as I'm saying all these things. There was like an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
What, how were you valuing yourself beforehand?
Oh,
Obviously, there's that moment where it kind of changes, but like as you started to build that sense of self worth, you talked about okay, you put yourself, but what were some of the like what was that like like building that sense of like the worth you wanted to be? What was that like? Yeah, could you share that?
Yeah. I think that for me, um, I had lost myself so much from the years of perpetual abuse and belittlement and lack of confidence and, all the things that it really was this process of, and it's kind of crazy because I was a little bit was forced into it, like do or die, right? I had to take care of my children. I had to figure this all out. But as I put one foot in front of the other, and I think that piece of it, that trusting that even when it didn't look like it, but it started to give me confidence again, that helped me start to see that, you know what, I can do this. I am strong. I am intelligent. I can build a business. I can, so I think it was part of it was just sometimes it's just stepping in and doing it to start building that confidence again was part of it. Um, I think for too much of my life, my worth came from external. So it was, you know, seeking or desiring to be loved and that attention, where very intentionally I was like, no, my worth truly um, comes from God. And that even though I'm broken and imperfect and do all kinds of things wrong, um, that I was created perfectly to be who I am, and giving myself permission that I'm not supposed to be. And I think you touched on this earlier, like we look to the world, we look outside of ourselves and we compare. As women, I don't know, I'm sure it's men too, but gosh, we are horrible for ourselves. I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not whatever, right? And so I think it was, and I struggled in my early days with an eating disorder, and that's how I ended up in fitness. So there's, big pieces around that as well. But really coming to that place of like, I am who I am, and this is who I was created to be. And of course, I always want to continue to be better and to show up in ways to serve and to help people. It's the company I work with now. Our tagline is love, serve, grow. And it is, it's the key to life. When you love people, you serve people, you grow. And whether that's personally or professionally or internally and all those things. But um, yeah. And I think that a big part of that is like not looking for that outside validation, not comparing yourself to, is a big part of it for me.
I think it's a hard one, especially in this day and age, really easy. For the record, yes, men do compare a lot.
For the record, well, I know it's part of your story, which I love.
It
I'm like,
is. But I say that as a man, and I'm pretty open about it. Probably not even as open as I need to be for what I want to do. But that being said, I find men like how do I say this? The mental health thing is starting to kind of come online as like it's a real thing. It's starting to be gravitate to have a little more social acceptance. So it's like, oh, this is kind of the norm to talk about this beforehand. The older generations
oh,
will think of as classic stoicism, which is not really stoicism. I think people have grossly misunderstood that. Anybody who's interested in that, read any of Ryan Holiday's stuff on stoicism. I think it helps reframe your perspective on it. But yeah, men do the same thing. So I think there's a new empathy that's kind of happening around that between both men and women that I don't think is fully understood yet, but it's coming there. But it's kind of crazy. It's so easy. And if anything, nowadays it's even easier to compare yourself to others without, I think most importantly, it all lacks context. It's easy to
mm,
take a picture on social media, but not really know
Oh
How
yeah.
curated was that? How fabricated was that image? And do you do you even want to know what the rest of that person's life is? And you had mentioned before when you started speaking about or opening up about the challenges you were going through, they're like all these other people are like, yeah, I went through that. And you'd never know because everybody's so good
Yep.
asking their shit. Hmm. What if we were
It's
just
kind of crazy. Part of my job as a social media is I'm a social media coach. And what we're seeing, and I love, is that creating content to connect is what works because so many people are seeking connection. And so the days of like all the perfectly curated pictures and all the graphics and all the things, it's not working. And so it's a blessing. It's really fun to help people tap into like their true values, what's important to them. How do they create content to actually connect with people? That leads to relationships because in business, as anything else, right? It's all about relationships and it's trust. And so it's been interesting to see that change over time.
well, I think there's another layer to what you're talking about, especially I think it's uh fitting as well. Like you're in the beauty industry and you're
Mhm.
in the fitness industry, and it is to some extent it is also about appearance.
Oh yeah.
So I think what's hard and what's difficult or for what's an interesting balance to come to terms with is how do you align both the internal and the external? Because
Mm.
we still do want to, what's the word? Look good. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say I don't want to look good. I'm not going to say I don't want to look good naked. The company's called Naked Sunday for a damn
Maybe
reason. I
Sunday.
still do want to look good on the outside. I care about that.
Yeah.
And far be it for us to say, like, doesn't matter who you are, people do look at you and they
Oh,
like they're passing judgment. And it's not necessarily always in a bad way, but people are just busy. They are busy, they're distracted. So organizing yourself and fitting, you
mm.
know, a certain level of like, oh, this looks somewhat put together. It looks like there's some consistency behind this. That resonates. So how do you align the two of those things without being like just so fake? Like
Oh,
what's like that? You kind of get where I'm going. Like I'm just
oh,
curious
I
about your
totally
take on
get it.
something.
I
Yeah.
have personal stories about because I struggled with my weight and I worked in the fitness industry. This was at the tail end of college. I am not kidding. I will never forget this. And I was so angry. So I'd worked out at this gym for a long time and I lost like 60 pounds. And I had a guy walk up to me once and he was like, "Oh, are do you have a sister?" And I was like, "I do, but she doesn't live here. Why?" And he goes, "Oh, because there's this girl who's really fat, but she looks very similar to you." I was like, "Oh, that's nice. Thank you."
Wow.
But so there is like the reality is the reality. But it's interesting and it looks different for different people, but you'll laugh. One thing for myself personally, and I don't tell people they need to do this, but I do think there's a sense of self-worth. There is a reason that I eat healthy and work out. And all during COVID, when I was working at home, I still got up and got dressed and did my hair, did my makeup, and put on clothes. But that is something for me internally that I know I feel different when I do that. So I think there is that piece of it for an individual. Like it's not about looking perfect or any of those things, but for me, I feel different. I know there's a different type of energy that comes across for me when I do that for myself. So it was doing it for myself, not necessarily doing, I wasn't going anywhere. I was working in my house and of course I was on Zoom, but um so I think there's a balance to that, right? You and I both, we're from the world of fitness and health and in the reality is that is important because I'll tell you, it's all connected, mind, body, spirit. And when one of them is out of alignment, I think it throws everything out. So if it's your health, then it's going to make it difficult for anything. And for me, for sure, as I get older, I'm like, oh, please, if you're young and you're listening to this, do it now. Don't ever stop. Joint movement, move your joints, like right. But so I don't know if I answered anything there, but just
Well, I think probably the most important thing worth taking out of that is the intention, which sounds very woo to a lot of people.
mhm.
Like, I'm just going to show up with this intention today, and then I'm going to manifest it. Like,
That's
that's
it. Yeah.
not like that kind of like, or the intention. Your actions were fueled by the intention of I'm doing this because this is right for me, as opposed to I'm doing it for everybody else.
Yeah.
And I want to put myself in the best opportunity to do what's right for myself. It's fueled by an intrinsic motivation as opposed to the external validation that we were talking about before. The actions are the same damn thing. You said, like, I still work out, I still exercise, I still choose to eat these types of foods. It's not like somebody else told me I had to eat these foods. No, it's not. I was supposed to do these workouts today. No, 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 no. I wanted to because I know that the results of that are better
Mhm.
for me, and I feel better, and it works out better, and my success is better.
Mhm.
Um, I think that intention that we talked about, intentionality, being intentional from that intention to show up with this focus, with that desire in mind. What I thought, and this came to me, and I forgot that I'd come back and touch on it. You had talked about one of the big motivations for the shift in your self worth pursuit or the mm, discovery and the strengthening of it. It was like, I'm doing it for my kids.
Mm, mhm.
But I find, especially with the caregiver energy persona, is that it's so interesting that we have to find a way to associate us being nice to ourselves and building ourselves up for the benefit of others to make that switch. It's not until like, wow, I'm staring it straight in the face and imminent calamity and destruction are really like, there is no other option. I can't put this be nice to myself thing off any longer because it's genuinely, I have to do it for my kids. I have to do it for my family. I have to do it for the people in my stead.
Mhm.
I find that to be a very interesting element of what I would call heart-centered leadership. I don't know if you have any thoughts around that, but
No, I have lots of
yeah.
thoughts around that because for someone like me who, I shared in the beginning, like I was all about give, 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 give to take care of everyone else. And I don't know if I mentioned to you previously, but I also take care of my mom who had a stroke. So I am a caregiver for her and, I still have two of my children at home and, um, but that has been part of this growth process and worthiness as well, because I had to sit with why I didn't feel like that self-care, which I know it's probably overused too much, but why was that self-care for myself less significant or not? I wouldn't make that a priority. But what I found is through this, and again, a lot of this, and it's funny because I'm like, okay, God, I guess I am that person that you just gonna push me, right? Um, when you have nothing left, you realize that you don't need anything, that you had that I realized that I had it. But if I didn't cultivate and I didn't take care of this, that I wasn't going to be there. I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I had to do. And so that was a big deal for me because again, I had just sacrificed, sacrificed, sacrificed. And even now in making, I travel quite a bit and um in the beginning I felt guilty and are my kids not going to like this? And but it's something that I love to do. And so I have made that a part of my life and my priority. Like, this is something that I absolutely love. And although I love my children and I love my mom and everything else, I've just made accommodations so I can now do that. And it's crazy because I feel like it makes you a better parent. It makes you a better caregiver in my situation for my mom. So um I think a lot of people, or I know I had a lot of fear around what's going to happen if I do that, if I make myself a priority. And I'm not going to lie, Caleb, I might even have some friends that listen to this that probably judge me because people are judgmental, right? But the greatest feeling ever and where I'm at in the space that I walk in now is I love them anyway. They can judge me. They don't have to agree with me, but I love them anyway.
Well, I love that in general. Like, I have a friend, she is over the other day. I was talking about how I decided to have no enemies. I want to lean into this. They can judge, but love them anyway. She was, I told her, like, I decided not only to forgive them, but to love them for all the things. And I actually brought up the Stockholm syndrome thing to her. I was like, I know it sounds a little Stockholm syndrome, but I promise you it's not. It's a different
But
vibe.
it's
It's a different
different.
vibe.
Yeah.
It was for me too. It was like I realized my ability to succeed, which inevitably is also my ability to care for my family and to, fulfill my purpose, whatever that kind of stuff is. I had to go this path and I had to learn how to love them anyway. And she, of course, like, that's very biblical of you. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, unintentionally it happened though. This was as I was kind of rebuilding my own spiritual relationship with everything, because that was definitely part of the spiritual journey and coming to my connection with God. Um, I think it's very hard for people to wrap their head around.
Mhm.
Love somebody for that.
Mhm.
And in many ways, it also allowed me to see like the things that I didn't like in myself at one, either then or at one point.
Mhm.
How I had to ask myself, like, how would that come to a happier reconciliation if I was that person who felt like that other person was my adversary? How would I come around to their side? They would love me, so I should love them. And all of a sudden, it worked. It works a lot better. I mean, it doesn't always mean like they are rainbows and butterflies, but you're at peace, and somehow it also sets them free in a different way. And
Totally.
yeah, so I love what you're saying there. There's another thing in what you brought up. I think that the self care you're talking about and showing up and being passionate. You had said like, I feel like this path I'm doing allows me to be a better parent, but also a better caregiver. I think we have. I'd love to get your take on this. I think we have a skewed idea of what it means to care for another.
Mm.
I think we have a selfish understanding of what it means to care for another.
Mhm.
And I think the only way we think about it is in like, I spent a bunch of time with you, but I can think of a bunch of people I've been around where I felt like that was a waste of my time. This could have been a 5 minute conversation. We could have
Yeah.
gone on more of a day and you could have let me go back to living my life. And if that's all they said, I'd be like, that would have been great. That would have been awesome. I would have felt cared for and valued. But the other rest of it was like, no. And I should have also probably clarified, but there's plenty of other things. Like when you feel like you're also a burden to somebody,
Mhm.
I don't think there's a lot of connection there. I think what you're alluding to with your practice and how you have crafted your life is that when you are present, you're fully present because of the filling your cup concept. You've poured energy into yourself through doing acts that energize you and make you feel aligned and make you feel connected, or you feel good in your body because you exercise, you nourish your body with appropriate foods that make you feel good. Now, all of a sudden, you can be there with that person. Maybe it's, I was so focused on you because I could really hear what you're saying. I asked the question that you really needed to hear from me. Um, or I gave you the hug that you really needed, or I could I could get you that gift because I was really thinking about you while I was gone, and like it showed up, and I could really be like I was tuned in. I think what it highlights here is that we're so focused on us receiving our love language, and we think everybody has to feel love the way we do, as opposed to thinking, how does that person need to be loved? Well, you
Mm,
can't know that if you don't know how to feel love yourself.
so powerful. So true.
Ranting, but I'd love to hear some of you.
No, I love it. One thing that popped up for me, so the CEO and founder of Beauty Counter, very successful businesswoman, but beautiful family, children. She said, and this really stuck with me. This was probably almost 9 years ago. Was at a conference, and she said, this concept of having to be all things to all people. Like oftentimes, especially as a mom, you're like, I got to do all these, I have business, I have kids, I have all these things, right? She said, we can't be all things to all people at all times, but we must be all things to the person in front of us in that moment. And that was really powerful for me. I used to really struggle with the work-life balance, and I was homeschooling when I first started. Like it was like I remember, and we were really strict parents. Like my kids didn't even have cell phones till they were older, but I remember my own children calling me out about being on my phone. It was horrible. But from that, and obviously over time, have learned that like be present. One of my biggest pet peeves in life is walking in a restaurant. And you probably know what I'm going to say, huh? Walking in a restaurant and seeing a couple or a family, and they're all on their phones. I'm like, I literally have been tempted to like tap them on the shoulder and be like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. I mean, and my perspective in all things and children, but obviously with losing a child, you think of moments differently. So yeah, be present.
Did I tell you I love you?
I think you did, but I love you too.
Let's remind you.
Thank you.
Let's pivot to our fun questions. You'll like
Okay.
them because it will kind of harken back to some of the things we were just talking about.
Yay.
Question number one. What sports or creative activities did you play when you were younger, and how did you play them?
Awesome. Oh, wow. I loved all sports. I played volleyball, basketball, and did track. And my favorite probably was volleyball. And just like everything else in my life, I don't do anything halfway. So, I was team captain, I was committed, I was all in. Yeah. I played a volleyball game after a car accident and had a broken rib, much like not missing school.
You're, you're the third person in my part of the second person in my life who knows because I was not the only person when I graduated who also did not miss a day of school. So there
I
was
can't even believe that. I don't know that I've ever met somebody else. Most people think I'm a weirdo for that. They're like, what? I'm like, oh no. Yeah, fever, choking, like coughing, it didn't matter. Mhm.
what's funny is I didn't actually miss a school since like the second week of sixth grade. So that's like extended
Yeah.
a little further,
I'm
right?
guessing mine was probably pretty similar, but I'm like, yeah, no.
For that, like a badge of honor. Why? Why I asked that question? I took a class in college. I studied kinesiology, and one of the classes was on play. And you
Hmm.
answered the question beautifully. The way we play when we're younger often sets the tone, and it really is it's a map of how we go about things. Go figure, all in. You did a lot of things. You talked a lot about trying to be everything to everyone. You played a lot of sports, but all in, fully committed. Go figure. You kept doing that all along. You basically answered the the reflection behind the reflection from the question. So I love that. That was a great one. Question number two. Stranded on a desert island,
Mm.
one movie and one TV show that you get to watch for the rest of your life. What are those? What's the
Oh,
desert island?
you are gonna laugh when I answer this. Okay. Before I got married and I was in college, I didn't even have a TV.
Wow. Wow.
I have always been a I love books. I love reading. I love listening to podcasts. I do have a TV now, but you will laugh. One of the things with my significant other, Jim, that it's been a whole, he thinks it's great because I've never seen anything. So every, all the way back, he's like, have you seen this? I'm like, nope. So I'm not sure I can answer that. But no, I will say there was one series that I watched that, and it's not necessarily what I would think would be my genre, but I loved the series 24.
Oh,
Did you watch 24?
only a couple episodes. It didn't like grab
Oh,
me.
you're kidding. No, I binge watched it. It would be up until like 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. So that's,
What
yeah.
did you love about 24?
I don't even know. I think it was like the suspense, and then it was kind of funny looking back. I'm like, yeah, and all that happened in 24 hours. I have no idea.
It could be an interesting metaphor for life, though. It's like we have, as much as we think we have a long time that we're living, like
I know.
pretty a short time and there's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of building to the end of like, huh, wait, what? Oh, that, like, and a lot of checkpoints, a lot of cliffhangers, a lot of like, oh my God, I don't know how it's going to work out. Are we going to be able to solve this thing?
Yeah.
Reason why I
So
asked that question, I think there's an interesting, the fact that you answer that way, like, I really don't know because I that didn't have a team. I love that. Love everything about it. I probably should get more on that level at this point, but I asked that question because, I think what entertainment we engage in, especially the ones that we come back to,
mhm,
says a lot about how, like, says a lot about how we think about life. Why
mhm.
do we come to those? Why do we connect to it? That was kind of the interesting thing I was bringing out.
So what
Like,
are yours? I'm curious. Maybe and I'll write these down because I have a notes list in my phone now. I'm like, oh,
I'm curious to see what you come back with. But that being said, the lack of having answers to that, my first thought was like, well, she just told me she tries to go be present with people as much as possible. So she's not distracted by the television. Like, sounds on point. Sounds pretty congruent. Like, I just be present on the desert island. I would not be looking for a distraction. So on brand, very on brand. Third and final question. What's your deathbed meal and who are you sharing it with and why?
oh wow, that's a powerful one. So meal, it's interesting. Food, food is food is interesting. I actually have celiac, so it's even more interesting for me. But I would have to say my favorite food, and it is gluten free, is Mexican food. Good Mexican food.
Taco
Mhm.
Tuesday style.
Yeah, I love Chipotle. Really any Mexican, but yeah. So
Health right
definitely
to the end. Right to the end.
right up to the end.
Chipotle. We're going Chipotle final.
We're going Chipotle. I know. Hey, maybe you'll get a sponsorship from them.
I would I would be Chipotle if you ever listen to this.
Yes.
Gladly. I will sling Chipotle to
Yes.
I'll be in every commercial you want. I got you covered.
I would too. Yeah. My children would as well. We're all the same. We are diehards. So and of course I would want to be surrounded by the most important people to me, which are my most beloved children, my mama, and my closest friends, just in those last moments. Um, I hope that on that day, and we're not all given that opportunity, right? I look at Betty, and that was a gift that she was given, kind of knowing in a way. I mean, some people might not view that as a gift. Um, But I would hope, even if today was my last day, that I believe that the people that know me would celebrate the life that I lived and not be sad because they would know that I was so blessed, and that um, yeah, I would want them to celebrate my life.
That was a great answer. So, the reason why I asked this question is number one, I love food. I think every human loves food. And people who
I
don't
love
like food, I'm
food.
like,
I
that's a
love food. Yeah.
but I believe world peace is going to be solved one family dinner at a time,
Mm.
as that is the first school. The first thing, as you said, you go out to dinner, you see a family, and they're all on their phones. You're
Mm.
not solving anything. Go figure. That might be the place. Put the phone down, see the people in front of you, have the chat. Because if you can't talk to your family, we don't even know how to start talking to our family. How do you think you're going to build a family in the future? That to me is this bizarre concept that we've really lost. And I think something about food. Food is like culture on the plate. It's what it espouses a lot of our values. It's and you knowing from the fitness industry, most people who have not come through the fitness industry, they're just saying trying to change somebody's diet, it's like trying to change their religion because it's not just food that's on the plate. All the beliefs, all the things. Go figure. Health nut to the end. Chipotle. You're like ride or die Chipotle. Let's go. Secondarily, I asked the part about who you're sharing with. I said it a lot now, but I'll say it again. I wrote a speech for my because I officiated my youngest brother's wedding a few years ago. And the speech is titled "The Window and the Mirror,"
Mm.
and I started off as they say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but what if there's something more?
Mm.
And ultimately, it comes around to it's a mirror. Person
Mm.
in front of you is your mirror. It's showing you who you are, but it's the perception that it is a window where you're looking into this other person, into their soul, but it is also reflecting that back to us. Hence, why we're attracting. And where I go with this is that on our last day, especially if we can choose the people that are there, they're sharing the final culmination. They're showing the furthest growth of our life in
Mm.
front of us. They are that representation. So when you answer that, it's always beautiful. Like to see my family, to see those people, like what are we seeing in ourselves at the end if we can choose it? So I think it's a very beautiful thing that we do with that. And I think the more we think about that question, and so I think about death every day, but I explicitly think who's going to be there on my deathbed gives me the answer of who I need to be spending my time with, or more
Mm. Yeah.
presence. Overarching concept, all three of these questions. And I told you were going to like some of where I was going with this about being present. I wrote a
Mm.
blog post a few years ago about my father and my lessons from my father, and one of them is be present. He traveled a lot, worked a lot when I was younger. Um, but I always knew I was loved. We were also not, we didn't need to say I love you. We changed that past several years, then, but I always knew I was loved. And it's because every 4 to 6 weeks, he'd always take me out to a boys' night.
Mm.
And I would go to Sports Authority, which is in New York, or at least used to be all over the place. I don't think they're open anymore. I think they went bankrupt. We'd wander around, talk about sports, talk about other stuff and sports. We would go grab a bite to eat and we'd see a movie together.
Mm.
And despite all the other shit that I had actually no concept of what was going on in his life, I didn't know about the worries and the stressors and all that stuff from running a business and all those things. He was completely there with me. That's why I thought what you were sharing about being profoundly like present with the people you love was so valuable because this was my way of sharing a little bit of like, hey, I'm here with you. I love you. Thank you for going on this journey with me through this stuff today. And so there's a little beyond
I,
the trivia questions or whatever you want to call them. For the
I
little,
love it. I love it. Well, you'll love this, and you'll have to do this. I know you're expecting, so it'll be a little bit, but we do. I so am about the dinner table. We do Sunday dinner. Even my adult children know that they need to be there. And we usually have lots of extras, so lots of extra kids as well. But not only do we have the dinner, but we share what we call a rose and a thorn and what we're grateful for. So we go around and we share something, a rose, something that was good that week. We share the thorn, something that was challenging. We share something to be grateful for. And we have a therapist that we work with for our family in losing my son Joshua, that we incorporated sharing a fun or funny memory about him.
Pretty
And
beautiful.
it's awesome.
Wow.
Mhm.
I think a lot of families, any parents listening to this right now, put that on your checklist. Moms, dads, whomever are listening right now, add that one to the list. Sunday dinner with the family, rose, thorn, and gratitude.
Naked Sunday, Sundays.
There might have been some subcontext to all those naked Sundays stuff.
Well, you know, it's okay.
Tammy, my dear, if somebody's listening right now and they're like, I need more of her in my life. She's the bomb.com. I just need her energy to infuse my soul more frequently. What is the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Probably would be to reach out to me through Instagram and just connect. I love connecting in the DMs. I am a connector. And so even if there's not something that I can do for someone, I just love connecting with people like you and kind of how we met, other people. I just love hearing people's story. And if there's some way that I can show up and serve them, then I love to do that. Or maybe it's that I know somebody they need to know. So that is best. And I am Tammy B. Harris on there. Um, so yeah, let's love to connect there.
If y'all didn't write that down, don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. Promise. Um, Tammy, I'll say it for a fourth, fifth, 12th time, whatever, how many times it's been now. I love you. This has been
You,
incredible. What are your final words of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with today?
hmm, final words of wisdom. I think we've said it over and over and over. But I guess in summary, make the most of every moment, love intentionally, serve intentionally, and grow intentionally.
Mic drop moments from start to finish. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on today. This has been just to hang out with you. It was fun anyway,
Oh,
good enough.
I love
But
it.
I'm just happy that I know, especially for everybody who's still listening, like lots of great nuggets, lots of wisdom, lots of like soul in your story. And I think that a lot of people stand to grow from what you've shared with them today. So I really appreciate that. Everybody, make sure you go check out Tammy, check out the show notes for her link to connect with her. You'll be happy you did. Clearly, I'm very happy about it. Uh, yeah, what a true blessing. So thank you everybody for sharing your time and energy with us today. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.